A very warm welcome to all. I'm Aarti Kadare, member of WDC KES Shroff College, welcoming you to the second day of online training program on gender, disaster and sustainable communities, organized in association with National Institute of Disaster Management. Before we start with today's program, participants kindly take note of following points. All your questions are welcome. You can put your questions in the chat box, which will be answered during question and answer session. We will put feedback link in the chat box during vote of thanks. Participants who will be attending training program and fill feedback form all 3 days, only those can get e-certificate. Feedback link will not be shared on any platform except Zoom chat box. On the first day, we had two remarkable speakers, Dr. Lavanya Shanbag and Dr. Vibhuti Patel. Dr. Lavanya Shanbag Madam focused on how to develop resilience capacity among vulnerable women and children to come out of problematic situation of environmental disaster. Dr. Vibhuti Patel Madam started discussion on it is necessary to activate constructive policy and resolution which should not be gender based. It should be universal. She specifically explained how to interconnectivity has to be developed between vulnerable women, children, and micro-macro policy, and getting equal access to all advantages and facilities, thereby leading to safe and healthy lifestyle among women. With this, we will start with today's session. May I now request Ms. Samita Sen Gupta, convener of WDC, to introduce our first resource person for the day, Dr. Geeta Balakrishnan. Over to you, Samita ma'am.
Thank you, Aarti madam. A very, very good afternoon to all of you present over here. It's my privilege to introduce dominant speakers, Dr. Geeta Balakrishnan. Ma'am has retired as principal from the College of Social Work, Nimala Niketan. Ma'am was engaged in the work education and she had practiced more than 32 years in this aspect and in this field. She served as a former director. She was a director of the research unit of college, directed several research studies on socioeconomic and health aspects pertaining to vulnerable groups, for example, tribal communities, religious minorities, children, disabled women, children, aging population, and sex workers. Currently, ma'am is working as an assessor with NAC. She is also a peer reviewer for national and journals on social work. She is also a member of Academic Council and Research Committee of the College of Social Work, Nimala Niketan. She is visiting faculty of SPGen Institute of Management, and her special focus area is she is working as a chairperson at Family Service Center, which is an organization basically working more than 65 years in the field of non-institutional services for children, including adoption, foster care, and sponsorship. So, ma'am has got lots of credentials to her name. So, thank you, madam, and over to Geeta, madam.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Samita, and thank you to, I think, Dr. Vanita, Dr. Vaishali, Dr. Aarti, Dr. Balia, and of course, Dr. Vibhuti Patel, who has been, I think, the friend for several people. Can you hear me now, Aarti? Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
So, welcome to this training program. I think we have several students here and faculty members. And the best thing is to inform all of you about mainstreaming gender. How does one work on issues of gender as well as other issues in or after disasters? So let me share my screen with you, and thank you to everyone again. So it's a beautiful experience to be here, KES College, especially the WDC cell, because we are all connected to the Women's Development Cell, and we know how important it is for our colleges. Yeah. So can you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. Is it okay? I can just go on?
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. So, members who are attending this, let me set the context for today's presentation. In the recent times, all of us know that there have been several, most of us, our countries, they have experienced major natural disasters, hurricanes, tsunamis, floods, earthquakes, and of course, now it is the pandemic which is creating havoc everywhere. And disasters, they affect women, children, girls, boys, everyone differently due to the gender equalities caused by socioeconomic conditions, cultural beliefs, and traditional practices that repeatedly have put women at disadvantage. A lot of this was covered yesterday by the guest speakers yesterday, who were really, they gave us so much of information. Let me tell you, but setting the context again, that women and men manage, they respond, and they experience disasters differently. And this is mainly due to their gender roles and gender equalities. And promoting women's empowerment for broader resilience strengthening is very essential during disasters and after disasters. So let's keep this context in mind, and let me go to the whole aspect of vulnerability. This was also covered yesterday, but I'd like to put down certain points when we're talking about vulnerability, and that is, vulnerability is a diminished capacity of an individual or group to anticipate, cope with, resist, and recover from the impact of a natural or man-made disaster. And we all know that vulnerability is associated with several factors, mainly socioeconomic background, gender, social groups, etc. And also that poverty is one of the major contributors to vulnerability. And this poverty makes people much, much more vulnerable than anything. And poor people are more likely to live and work in the areas exposed to potential hazards and less likely to have the resources to cope when a disaster strikes. So this is the context of the discussion today. And I'm going to base a little of or a large part of today's presentation, especially since there are teachers and there are students here, on the work that has been done by the College of Social Work Nirmala Niketan, where I come from, and that disaster management is a conscious action by the teachers and the students and of Nirmala Niketan, and this has been to prevent, mitigate, and minimize the extent of damage. We also realized, participants, that there is an urgency to prepare social work students, and of course all students from all the colleges, I think we should get a message from here, that we need to prepare our students to respond in crisis situations. There are so many things happening, so we need to prepare our students to respond in crisis situations, along with preparation for a planned intervention. So this presentation will look at the varied experiences of disaster intervention of the college, and then we will see how the college, and through our experiences, how did we mainstream gender in our work, and also the type of strategies that were used and what the lessons that we learned. So we believe that I keep saying we believe, but because I'm part of the college still, I have retired 4.5 years ago, but I'm still very, very connected to the college, as I have been from 1975 onwards. So we believe that persons, especially women who are affected by disasters, they have the right to assistance to regain their functioning. So I think this is extremely important for us to keep in mind, that they have the right to assistance, and this should result in recovery and rehabilitation, and also that they should participate in the plan for their rehabilitation. So this is the background of how we started our work and what the type of work that we did. So it is, and in social work, we realize that it is critical to present information on women. We work with so many people, and work with all groups of people is important, but it's important to present information on women, because there are a number of structural factors that shape the lives and circumstances of women. And social workers, as social workers, and all students and teachers, we must be aware of this, so that our interventions do not add to the vulnerability of clients through benign neglect. So we are not adding to their vulnerability just because, and we keep doing things which may not help them. So this is the background with which we work. And we also realize that social work is a profession that aims at improving the social functioning of individuals, groups, and communities. But this improvement must address the threats that are posed by disaster hazards, vulnerabilities, and the risks within the communities. So it's important to keep this in mind as we go ahead. We are going to look at a little bit about the intervention of the college. We realized that over the last several years, from 1958, the college started in 1955, but right from 1958 to 2016, we have directly participated and intervened in more than 18 disasters. So the first one started when I was not part of the college that time, was in 1958 with the fire in the urban camp. Then we went on to, of course, the drought in Maharashtra. The Bhopal chemical gas leak was when several of us went to Bhopal to intervene there. The Jambalpada floods, of course, in Maharashtra. The communal riots. Now, this communal riots was in 92, 93, and the earthquake, Latur earthquake in 93 onwards. We realized that we were really required. The government had actually asked us to come and intervene. And they said that you have the expertise to come and intervene in this disaster situation. So several times it was the government which was coming forward to ask us to intervene. During other times, we were actually doing it ourselves, the faculty members, etc. And also, if you look at this, the super cyclone in Orissa, some of the examples that I'm going to give here will be from these type of interventions. The super cyclone, of course, when 165 of us just closed college and we went and we worked there for nearly 10 days after the super cyclone. Gujarat earthquake was an extremely different experience because the type of people who were affected in Gujarat were totally different from the very poor farmers in Latur.
Ma'am, you're mute.
How do I do that? Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, then even in instances like the terrorist attack, this was again when the government came and state government asked us to intervene. The communal violence in Kandhamal after the violence against religious minorities, the landslide in Uttarakhand, etc. So this gives you a context of the type of interventions that the college has done. So the process used to be, and this I think it's a good lesson for the teachers here and the students also here, that for all these disasters, there was always a flurry of activity in the college because everybody wanted to do something. A lot of discussions, permissions had to be taken from the university. Pilot teams were sent to the disaster site so that one assesses the extent of knowledge of loss and the type of intervention that was required. Consent of parents, it was always important to take the consent of parents because without that we could never take the students. And also students were always trained. Those students who wanted to go were trained in first aid, trauma counseling, civil defense, interviewing skills in disaster work, and preparation for group activities. And then after the return of the pilot team, there was a detailed plan for every location so that there was planning and there was also teams that were formed. So just a few pictures, very few pictures of how the type of work that was done after the tsunami. After the tsunami, I think we spent nearly 22 days in Kadalur and Nagapattinam, and several lessons learned from this. So it was a Latur, the Raigad, the Kadalur, where we had several group sessions with women, with men. We did a lot of intervention with children, health. So there are just a few photographs which I put to the participants here, and I'd like to tell you that one of the main values that was the background of our work was the sensitivity to social inequality. This social inequality raises its ugly head in disaster situations, and this we really realized. And so whatever I'm going to present now is our experiences, which sometimes gets corroborated by theoretical information in books, but these were our experiences. And So the social inequality highlights the practices of social exclusion and inclusion. So this is so prominent during the disaster interventions. And we also realized there's a big understanding that we gained, that was that the dependence on others to assist day-to-day living activities, it actually breaks the human person. So we are speaking a lot about resilience. Yes, it's very important. Women are extremely resilient. They do a lot of work. But we also realize in the field that it really breaks. If you are required to depend on somebody else for your day-to-day activities, it really breaks the human person. Another observation that we had was there's a big divide between those who are affected and those who are not affected. Especially we found wherever we were, whether it was Latur, whether it was Gujarat earthquake, wherever, there's always a divide between those affected and those not affected. And the chasm that is formed between them, because those affected are always at, feel more vulnerable, and those who are not affected, suddenly, they are not in the picture of a lot of things. And cultural insensitivity, of course, yesterday Dr. Vibhuti Patel had also mentioned this. We realized that in several instances, because there is so much aid coming in during disasters, so much aid, truckloads of aid come in, and but sometimes we're so insensitive. Like for down south, where we were after tsunami, we realized that women were being given sanitary napkins. They were not being used. They were not used to use those sanitary napkins at all. And at times you would see that they felt it was supposed to be put on to children. So there was this sometimes, and also in terms of the topography of that place, the geographical conditions of that place, we realized that there are sometimes some families get about 10 to 12 blankets in places like Kadalur and Nagapattinam, where it is so warm. It's always very, very hot. It's either hottest in those areas in Tamil Nadu. And people were giving them blanket after blanket. So the houses were stacked with blankets. They were getting a lot of buckets. People give buckets, but some of the members, families were getting some 10, 12 buckets. You don't require them. So there's a lot of insensitivity even for aid. The other thing that we realized during another learning was that during a disaster, almost all the income sources of the family, usually they collapse. Men lose, of course, their income, but women also lose their assets as well as their employment opportunities. So women actually, it may not be seen outside, but women also they're always doing something in their homes. They're doing small businesses. They may even sell, maybe some tea outside, or some maybe idli and vada outside, but whatever it is, they had lost all those opportunities. And tremendous caring responsibility for women, but we also realize that they have tremendous insight, strength, capacity, and experience to help reduce these risks. So women, we realize, have so much, and they're so proactive in any emergency. They need to be we have to give them that lead to reduce the distress, because they are the ones who come out. They help in removing the debris. They help in creating safe places for people to stay. After the Kandamal violence, when we had gone to Orissa and to Kandamal, we realized that women were the ones who were, though they were all forced to go away, to run away into the forest, to be in safer places, but when they had to come back, they were the ones who were taking care of the others in the communities. And they're the ones who are ensuring that others have drinking water, they're nursing the injured, they're counseling and consoling the traumatized members. So women do a lot, and we need to realize how important it is to build women in these times of conflict and disasters. We also realized that another understanding that we gained was that a lot of painful and emotional ways and angry expressions of distress. So it's not that some of them are so pained by what is happening. Some are very angry, some are very emotional. So we need to understand this when we are working with women there, that women all women may not express their feelings, but we need to understand what their feelings are and be able to help them out in that. Another very important learning was that the entire community homeostasis, or the balance of the community, changes after a disaster, because, as I said, people bring in so much aid, and but the whole politics of charity and donations, etc., change the community balance and community homeostasis. Some are getting aid, some are not getting aid. Why are people getting aid? There are a lot of questions that happen. And we realize that the survival tactics of the smartest and the fittest is the one that works. So those people who can go in and stand in queues and get their aid, they're really very smart. But women always found it difficult to go out and get the relief materials, because they had to take care of the young children at home, the elders in the home. And there are cultural norms preventing women from going out and standing in the queues in some places. So women find it extremely difficult to go out and get their aid. Another thing that we found out, especially in Gujarat when we worked, which was really striking, was that the reactions to receiving aid depends on social standing of people. So many of the people whom we worked with in Gujarat were not from very poor families, but they were from middle class families, and their buildings had collapsed. So it was so difficult for them to come and stand in the queues and take, things like milk and bread. They found it extremely difficult. So the people's reactions to aid is also very difficult. It's not easy for anybody to go and stand in a queue and get your rations for the day. So though we found that in places like Latur and Orissa, where people were very poor, they didn't mind because they really wanted it. They had 7 and 8 children in the home to take care of. In Gujarat, we found that women also were very reticent to come and take aid. And but at the same time, we realized that this was also in many places that there's a lot of hoarding of relief materials. People just wanted that whatever was available, they would take it, whether they wanted it or not, that doesn't matter. So there's a lot of hoarding of relief materials, and the government also was hoarding, but that's a different aspect. Several rumors were generated. They get generated during disasters, and in one point, we had a very sad experience of a woman in Latur who was in a lot of debris, and there were youth who were coming and helping her to come out of that. But they heard about the river that had, the dam that had broken, and the water was coming in. Then they left that woman to die. So she actually she died in that. So when youth went back, the woman was already dead. So there's several rumors. Another rumor that we all were part of, because we were in Kadalur after the first tsunami, and then when we were there for some time, there was a rumor in the night there's another tsunami coming. Here again, we found women running helter-skelter to save their young ones, to ensure that everybody ran off, and then to safer places. And then there was this it was just a rumor. So we realize it is so important that everybody gets to know what is happening, and but rumor mongering is something we cannot help. So another thing that participants we realize is that media plays a very important part in covering disasters and covering up disasters. So they cover disasters very well, but then covering up in the sense of not revealing exactly sometimes the data, some important aspects of the disaster, what is really, and what happens to women sometimes is really not coming out in any press or whatever. So media is an important part, and we need to understand that they play a very important part. Another aspect of our learning is that the impact of forced evacuation on women can be really disastrous. So women, when they're forcibly evacuated, especially in many of these places, demolitions that happen, slum demolitions that happen, even in Mumbai on a daily basis, it is happening, and so many of us are part of these evacuations that happen, the demolitions that happen, and women it can be really disastrous, because women are the ones who are left to fend for everything at home. A lot of inadequate shelters wherever we are. tangible and intangible effects of disasters need to be considered. So disasters have both tangible effects as well as intangible effects. And the intangible, of course, everybody knows what happens in terms of livelihood. But the intangible ones, which can be child marriages, which are teen pregnancies, violence against the aged. See, all these very, very covert things that overt or covert things that happen, which do not really come out. These are very important for us to look at, and many of them related, of course, to women. In our understanding in many of these disasters, one of the things was that women who had loans earlier were not given fresh loans by banks. The banks have, so again, important for banks to be sensitive to these aspects about the distress faced by women, that women who had loans earlier were not given fresh loans, even though they had lost everything, because they were told that you already have loans, so you can't be given fresh loans. So that was another thing that we realized, that, and when the women told us that they are not getting loans, they want something for their homes. Yesterday also it was mentioned that women need to be helped to receive the messages. In a lot of disasters, men may receive the messages about the disaster, impending disaster, but women need to be helped to receive the message. And we realize that even if they are illiterate, but they are not really getting those messages, and they're not part of what is happening in their bastis, in their communities, in their villages. So I feel that we need to have a rights-based approach to recovery and rehabilitation when it comes to women, and women have to be given their dignity and not looked upon just as beneficiaries. So if we have that perspective, then it becomes much more easier to work with women and to work during disasters. And women can participate more in all the village affairs. So what is required is that, we enable them to work in these, and also that it's not only the physical requirements of women that need to be taken care of, but also the mental health requirements. There's a lot of mental health now, the COVID has shown us, and there are so many groups who are offering mental health relief to people, but this also has to be considered when we are working with them. Sometimes there is unequal medical attention. So again, these are for policymakers to take note of, that sometimes there's unequal medical attention. And in the Gujarat earthquake, there are findings that this resulted in more deaths among women because they were not getting the aid that was required. One thing that participants, I really realized when we were there, and I have been personally a part of 7 disasters. So I've been there in most of those, and I've actually 7 of them, if I'm just counting that. But women are carers, but they also need care in disasters. So sometimes we forget that they are always carers, but they also need a lot of care. And we need to identify all those areas in relief and pay attention. We have to understand also that women face sexual abuse. Sometimes after the Kandamal violence against women, as I said, they ran away to the forest to hide. There were snakes there, and there were all other insects and animals. They had no food for nearly 10 days. They had no food. They were eating whatever was available. And what happened is, because they were always taught to follow their spouses and everything, so very difficult for them to be alone. And in the relief camps also, in most of these places, we as social workers and social work students and teachers have worked in relief camps. Now we realize that the relief camps also, though they are put up with a lot of requirement, because it is important that we have relief camps, but sometimes not sensitive to women, and in terms of toilets, in terms of safety, space, disposal of sanitary napkins. Where do they dispose their sanitary napkins? And if most of them use cloth, how do they wash their cloth? There's no water sometimes. In terms of pregnancy issues, miscarriages, where do they change their clothes? Sometimes they're open toilets, and they're not, they don't have any shelter for the washroom. Where do they wash their clothes? Also in terms of clotting of breast milk, this is something that we realized, especially after tsunami, because many of them were lactating mothers, and they had lost their children, and the breast milk was getting clotted. So we need help. I mean, women need help in a lot of things. And though they're extremely resilient, I totally agree. But sometimes we don't take note of these very important things about women. And another thing that struck us was that all women are not mothers and they may not be living with men. So whenever we are talking about women, we talk about married women. But there are women who are not mothers and who are not married and they may not be living with men. So sometimes they get excluded. So when you're talking about inclusion and exclusion, this is one thing that happens a lot, that all women are, so that, there are, sometimes it's only for married women, children with mothers are included in certain things. But this aspect is something that we need to take care of. Women in relief camps, we realize that there's a lack of women doctors. So where do these women go? And they feel extremely shy in the villages to go to, first of all, they feel shy to go to a doctor. And if they're male doctors, it's, they're really distressed. And all these relief camps, wherever we have worked in so many places, males make up the committees in these relief camps. It's hardly you have women. So it is important that we have more and more women in these committees who will take care of a lot of things and who will be more sensitive to the issues faced by women. And because I put this point about housing, improvement housing near seacoast, because of our experiences for 20 days after the tsunami, we realized how important it is to have their houses strengthened so that, they're not running helter-skelter. Even when there's a big wave, they were for I think 2 or 3 years, because we had the college had rehabilitation programs there in Kadalur and Nagapattinam afterwards. We realized that it's so important to strengthen the houses there. And women can definitely help in the entire aspect of risk mapping, because they know about the climate, they know about the weather, they know about the type of wind there. So I think it's so important that we engage women or help them get engaged in this. After the Kandamal violence, the College of Social Work and the management, we put up homes. We built homes for women in Orissa, but 100 homes were built. And we realized that how important it is to have the deeds of the home in women's names and not in the men's names. So we realized it's so important for them to have that security. So that is how women get mainstreamed in the entire process of recovery. And of course, gender budgeting for relief funds is extremely important. Another area where women sometimes get excluded is because there are several marginalized women in the communities. There are women with HIV, there are caste, the caste issues regarding women, there are women who are sex workers, women who are transgenders. So this drives home the fact that we need to include all of them. I know it is going to be very difficult. Policymakers really have to bend backwards, I think, but it is important that all of them are included in the work that is done. Another what needs to be done, I don't know how much time I have, Aarti, 5 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So what needs to be done is to use women's knowledge and also recognize all the important roles that they play, of the mother, of the daughter, or whatever, of the teacher, of the doctor, of the ASHA worker, of the A&M worker. So recognize all the important roles that they play, and also to build their resilience. Of course, we all know. Yesterday, it was mentioned by the first speaker, that women have to be taught to swim. And this is something that we really realized when we were after the tsunami, after the Orissa floods and the super cyclone in Orissa. We realized that how many women told us that had we known to swim, we would have really gone across. So women, how important it is for women to swim is these are some things in terms of recovery that we can do. The role of women, of course, women can be engaged in a lot of things. So one is in the preparedness stage. So there are 3 stages, of course, of all the disasters. So one is a preparedness stage. Women can be helped to to teach simple day-to-day measures at home. and practice these measures. One of the very important things, and nowadays we have so many SHGs, so we can definitely, women can be engaged in educating the community about the various techniques used in the recovery, like the first aid. They can be helped to get information, trained in first aid, how to search, how to rescue, and also to identify all the community resources and prepare the family disaster management plan. This is what women can do. Hazard mapping exercises with the women's groups is something that women can do. Women's groups and SHG groups are a big source of wealth for us in our communities and in our villages, and then we need to really tap their potential. And also in this particular stage, so strengthening self-help groups, and also training women's groups like SHGs, ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, local leaders, women volunteers, and they can be trained as we have done also through our projects, helping them train in psychosocial care, first aid, child care during emergencies, preparation of emergency kits. We don't have to have everything done by outside people. Women themselves can do all this, and screening, of course, of disaster management films. In the response stage, as a second phase, disasters affect all the communities. So women and the disaster survivors, they generally require they require shelter, food, water. Women can provide excellent emotional support to the survivors and the vulnerable and the marginalized groups. They're the best people to go and talk to people, and with just some training, and most of them are so natural, you don't even have to train them. They empathize, and it's very, very beautifully done. And so they can understand the psychosocial concerns of the victims and respond accordingly. Another thing that women can do with a little bit of education and literacy, they can maintain the databases of the trained women's groups to help in immediate formation of community response groups. They are the ones who know people. They can depute, you can depute 2 or 3 small groups of 2 or 3 women, and they can be part of the response team. They can be, we realize that women can be caretakers of the temporary relief centers. You ask them to be caretakers, and they do an excellent job of manning the community kitchen, keeping a record of the women and children who are rescued, because women will know in the village who's there, in who. And also when it came to trapped victims, we realized that women know kiske ghar mein kaun hai aur kaun bahar nahi hai. So they would tell us, there's somebody in that house, or so the type of women, the knowledge that women have is phenomenal. The last, of course, is the recovery phase, and here also women can be engaged. So giving water, shelter, etc. But they're always very good managers. Women's ability to manage things, and then the resources then are so limited. So women are the best people to manage these resources, and also to build the capacity buildings of the affected communities can be done very well by women. Updating all the information regarding the requirement of services that the relief centers, taking an inventory of what is there, what is not there, and the relief centers is something that women can very well be engaged in, and they have the prowess and they have the expertise to do that, because they look for things that even no one else can do. The women's acumen and observation is excellent. So let's take care of the fact that women can really contribute a lot. And also in terms of mediating with the local administration and the affected community, women can be engaged and participate in the recovery assessment meetings to share their observations. We have realized that whenever the Tehsildar used to call for meetings, the women were never invited. It was always the men who were going to the Tehsildar's meeting, and we realized that why are the women not coming? They have all the information. So if they can be allowed, or not even allowed, they can be included in the recovery assessment meetings to share their observations, it will be a very big step for us as disaster workers. Okay, so these women taught us the meaning. I'm just going to last slide of mine. This was Kalika. In tsunami, the names have been camouflaged, but I'd just like to tell you that Kalika was a lady who about 35 years old, and she was taken as dead. And she was buried along with along with all the dead bodies. So she was about 4 or 5 beneath the dead bodies, and that entire pile of dead bodies was supposed to be set afire the next day, burnt. So Kalika suddenly woke up in the night. She came to her senses and realized that she was there, and with all the strength of the world, she said she came out of that pit, and she did not have a stitch of clothing on her in everything because she was taken as dead. So then she came running back to the village, and we happened to be in that village when she came running back. And in the next 2 or 3 days, she required a lot of help. But in the next 2 or 3 days, what she did is she was given compensation of 5,000 by the village, and she bought a small gold chain for herself. So when we asked her why this gold chain and why not food for the family, she said, no, my husband will eat up that 5,000 rupees. Instead of that, I would like to have this with me. Another person was Ambabai in Latur. Another short story from me. Ambabai lost all her 10 children in the Latur earthquake. Believe it or not, all 10 children were dead. Her husband had died. And yet she was there looking at all the children going to school and wishing them well. So this type of resilience is something that was amazing. And Purnima, of course, was a lady who had hung from the roof with 2 children on her shoulders after the tsunami, after the Odisha super cyclone, and she was rescued. So she was alive to tell us a story. So these women have taught us the meaning of resilience. And I don't think I can learn from any other book or anything. So thank you so much. And I think I can stop here. Shall I don't have to. Yeah. What do I do here?
I'll do stop sharing for you.
Yeah, please stop the sharing. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for wonderful session. There are so many praises in the chat box saying that a wonderful session, because sometimes participants, they don't chat for everyone but to the host. So messages are coming to me rather than to the chat publicly. So there are so many praises for you. Ma'am, there is a funny question over there. We are saying over here regarding to the disaster and the gender base and the sustainability, but why all these cyclones and tsunamis are named by the woman rather than the gender neutral over there? Those are why they are named as we say Rita or like that. So that is the funny question. I'm not understanding.
I wouldn't know. Probably, I mean, I hope it is because women are more affected and they really require, but not to, I mean, I do understand that when we are saying gender mainstreaming, it also means that men also get highly affected. It's not that we're not really saying that men are not affected, but we're just saying that women are affected more. So I hope that next time we have other names for these things. So
no, but now in the recent past we have given a name as Nisargana, so that's
yes.
why. But we are coming, I can say we are coming to the gender neutrality over there. Not
Yeah,
like
I do feel that we are. I think when I talked to Dr. Vaishali, she said several students and teachers. So why I made this presentation more in terms of what we can do, what we as students, as college students, as college teachers, as faculty members can do a lot. It doesn't have to be somebody else who's doing something, but we can do a lot. Need not be social work students, but it can be all types of students. Forward. Even in our college, if there's a disaster, even the teachers and faculty, faculty have not done anything for 2 days, the students will be at the door asking, what are we doing now? Should we not be going out and working? So students have got so much of, care and empathy, and they are my best teachers till today. I don't think I have a better teacher than my own students.
yes, ma'am, because even our students.
Aarti, I would just like to add here that, it is not true that all cyclones are named after women. We have had cyclone Hudhud, we have had cyclone Fani and Nisar.
Okay.
So it is, so this is not true that all cyclones are named after women.
Okay, I think that's a
Hello. Okay, my neck was okay. Yes, thank you, Ajinder ma'am. Thank you so
thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geeta ma'am, for such a
Thank you,
wonderful session and thought-provoking and giving your you're sharing immense knowledge with us. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Now we will, ma'am. Now we will proceed to our next session of the day. May I now request Mr. Rajkumar Gupta, member of WDC, to introduce Dr. Sangamitra Dhar to us. Over to you, Rajkumar sir.
Thank you, ma'am. I take this opportunity to introduce our today's guest speaker, Dr. Sangamitra Dhar madam, who is an professional social work practitioner, social researcher, and gender expert with a total of 14 years of intersectional program management experience. Madam specializes on issues of gender inequality, involuntary resettlement, displacement issues, child rights, and research methodology in social sciences. She has led an longitudinal behavioral change program on gender-biased sex selection in endemic states like Rajasthan and MP. For the states of Nagaland and Manipur. Currently, ma'am is hand-holding the state of Manipur to implement GRB in their state. Ma'am has also served as social development specialist to Asian Development Bank to work on resettlement and rehabilitation issues in the state road project in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Punjab, Odisha, West Bengal, etc. Academically, she has been a UGC fellow at the Department of Social Work, Jamia Millia Islamia University, New Delhi, and her doctoral work was unique, empirical effort on understanding the perception of displaced women in one of the Asia's largest special economic zone. We welcome you, ma'am. Now I request ma'am to start the session. Over to you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, all of you, and hello, everyone. First of all, let me take the opportunity to thank KESS team overall and Vaishali particularly for having the patience to answer all my queries whenever I had any doubts on this sessions and all. So thank you for that. And may I request, Vaishali, I've shared the PPT with you.
Yes,
so
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
you can
yes, ma'am. I'm sharing
show
this.
it. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So I am sure, first of all, I mean, the entire, yes.
Arti, ma'am?
Yes, you can make it full screen.
Yeah, that will be.
Yeah. So, holistic webinar. Sorry? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. So basically what I understand that this 3 days you guys are discussing about the entire DRR situation, and of course when Vibhuti Patel ma'am and all of you are speaking, then definitely it is going to be interesting. I just wanted to add that after Dr. Balakrishnan ji's presentation, I'm feeling a little challenged, because obviously we always look up to our teachers, and although you have not directly taught me, but of course you are my teacher. So thank you for this. My experience of tsunami rehabilitation monitoring assessment that I have done for Caritas in Nagercoil and Kovalam, that belt. So the experiences that you were sharing were actually taking me there, the kind of issues they had faced and the kind of aspects that were not met because of the like probably the planners were not able to understand how gender has to be seen, and for that matter actually human rights have to be seen, because there were many logistical and infrastructural issues that we realized that it did not make sense. Why did they have it at this place? Because I'll just give you one simple example. They had attached toilet and they never used it. They used it for hatchery and every other thing, and storeroom and everything. They did not use the toilet because it was attached to the house. So they did not understand the cultural practices of that area, the planners, and that's why this entire infrastructural project failed very bad, because they were not sensitive towards the client's requirement. So thank you for raising such pertinent issues. Today, I think I will just have a brief, because I understand the majority of the audience is students. So I will just take you through a brief sharing on what exactly is gender planning per se, and aspect of it. And basically it is the, I will just give a brief outline of the conceptual framework into the why it is required in the implementation. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. So primarily I will be talking about gender, disaster management and sustainable communities, the relevance of policy making and gender budgeting as a tool. Next slide, please. So I'll very quickly take you through these aspects, because I understand these are all social work students, and primarily in today's time with all the gender discussions, people are aware of it. So I will just have a very gender basically is not only about sex. It is also not only about women. So when we say gender perspective, we primarily are talking about a way of looking at the world, of looking at people, at understanding relations between those people. And gender discourse therefore is about the unequal relationship between men and women, and for that matter the other genders as well. And here we also like I would take a moment to emphasize that when we are talking about gender, gender is not only binary identification of sexes, but it encompasses every form of gender identity. So can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. So then we come to understand what is basically disaster management. So it is the organization and management of resources and responsibilities for dealing with all humanitarian aspects of emergencies, in particular preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation, in order to lessen the impact of disaster. So all these examples that Professor Balakrishnan ji has shared are all part of these. So they had gone to the response aspects or to the recovery aspect. But what nowadays we are trying to ascertain and try to intervene is to mitigate, to understand that one needs to be prepared. There needs to be a preparedness in order to address this kind of disasters, be it natural, I mean nature-induced or man-made. So that is very, very critical. And when we talk about sustainable communities, it's basically the discussion around resilient, how resilient and prepared a community is, who has ensured all aspects of mitigation against all forms of disaster, and are taking these measures to eliminate as well as to lessen the impact of risk of hazards through proactive measures taken before an emergency or disaster occurs. And gender responsive planning budgeting is and actually it can be a effective tool towards the same, because as even Dr. Balakrishnan has specified that when the goals of gender mainstreaming is to achieve a state of equal access to resources and opportunities for all, including economic participation and decision making, then then we have to understand that the matter is actually about equitable distribution of power, influence, resources in the society. So it is a holistic picture, and as she very rightly pointed out, that we have to understand that it is not just about one sex of the in the conversation. It is all the humanity basically in the context. So in this context, it is very important to ensure equal space and resources to women and men and the other sexes also to participate in the DRR decision making and actions over in all levels of it. So that is very, very critical. It should be accessible to and it should be designed with inputs from all parties. So it should be the plan that comes out should have a mutually benefiting aspect to it, rather than exacerbating the patterns of inequity. So that is very, very critical, and that we always have to keep in mind. So I will just take a global perspective that when we are talking about the sustainable communities, we are basically trying to understand it through the SDG lenses, because as we all understand, these are the 17 interlinked global goals designed to be for a lack of word, it's generally said that it's a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future. And for all, it's not just for one section of the society, but for all. So there is an altruistic aspect to it. And so those aspects are very, very important. And we need to understand that when we are talking about planning and strategies to this kind of disaster situations, or for that matter, any kind of situation where focused intervention is required, we have to understand that the instruments that we use are very, very strategic. So social policy as an instrument is applied by the government, we know that, to regulate and supplement market institutions, and for that matter, social structure. On it as social development professionals is something that we always have to keep in mind. And social policy is about, as we definitely understand, that it is basically about the redistribution and protection, and about addressing the social justice aspect of it. So these elements, if kept in mind while planning and designing, make a lot of change and a lot of positive a lot of positive energy comes into the room, because that is where the actual true sustainable development for all can be expected. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. So very briefly, as we know, I don't know if you have had a discussion on this, so I just thought that I'll very briefly talk about the SDGs and how it came into being. So we know that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted by around 193 United Nations member states at the 70th UN General Assembly in 2015, which committed to a very, very critical aspect. And that's why I will say this in under quotes, that leaving no one behind. So this is a very, very critical and fundamental aspect that we as feminists and people working on in this area are holding on to it, and we are taking to task this aspect, because globally women, girls, and diverse genders are disproportionately vulnerable to fully enjoying all forms of all economic, or for that matter social, cultural, and civil, or even political rights. So the CEDAW, the Beijing platform, actually are the bedrocks for the entire conversation that we have around many developmental issues, most particularly on gender mainstreaming. So that is the precursor that which actually supports our work that we do on the budgeting aspect. So now coming to what basically are we, no, please stay in the slide. Yeah. So when we look into the GRB part, because I understand this is a new word to many participants, so I would like to invest a little more time on explaining on that, or sharing on that, that when we were having these discussions around SDG, that because that was the precursor on which the GRB conversation is even more reinforced, that in the it was in Addis, Ethiopia, basically. It's called Addis Ababa, and it happened in, I think, July 2015. The third international financing for development conference was held, and in that this this commitment was made that ensuring gender equality and women's and girls empowerment, promoting peaceful and inclusive societies, and to advance an equitable global economic system in which no country or or person is left behind, enabling decent work and productive livelihood for all, while preserving the planet for all our children and future generations. So as you can understand, this is the commitment that they made, which is not only looking at the present thing, but they are also looking at the having a futuristic outlook, where they are trying to think about the next generation and how we are going to hand over the resources to them. So that is the commitment that was raised, and upon which, when we talk about gender budgeting, and we understand that gender budgeting is so very critical and kind of all important in this conversation, because this has been under discussions for a long time. Globally, it has been adopted in many regions. In India, it was, I believe, early 90s, the conversation started, and it was adopted in 2005-6. So that was adopted in the Union Ministry, but many states are yet to adopt it, and that's why this work is all the more important. So when we talk about budgetary allocations and their outcome, we have to understand that these budgets actually have differential impacts on men, women, and diverse genders. So one of the important areas for my macroeconomic policy, and the actually the entry point, which has gained widespread acceptance worldwide, is actually the incorporation of the planning, budgeting, and auditing aspect, which in short is called a GRB, which is gender responsive budgeting. So there is now an express realization that GRB is a very, very powerful tool, which ensures that government planning, budgeting, implementation, auditing does not bypass women and girls, who are among the most marginalized across all spheres of socio-economic development. So it is a methodology that strives to integrate a gender perspective into the government budgets and budgetary policies. It has been recognized as an effective policy instrument to attain the gender equality outcomes. So that those are the bases for kind of propagating on the GRB conversation. So more than around 90 countries have already engaged in GRB worldwide, of which 29 are from the Asia Pacific alone. So that is a very encouraging scene. And if we want to understand the origination of the GRB concept, it actually started in Australia in the mid 1980s, and since then the entire GRB landscape has continued to evolve in a very, very dynamic and rich way, and it has marked the diversity in terms of who all are the actors in the conversation, and how are we to engage them in the entire scope of work, and how are we going to have that conversation in a more proactive way, so that the target that the clientele that we are trying to address is benefited to the optimum. India, as I have said, has adopted it a couple of years, actually a decade back, more than a decade back. But there are many subnationals who are still adopting it. It's basically under the notification of Government of India, that Ministry of Finance directed line departments to set up GBCs. That those are gender budgeting cells, and develop the GBS, which is the gender budget statement, to monitor the percentage budget allocations for gender equality and women empowerment elements. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so as you can see from this image, because here many of the students are here, so I hope everybody can see the image. You will see how interpretation, how a social research is wrongly interpreted if the facilitator is not capable enough. So in this example, you'll see this guy, the spectacle guy is asking a bunch of women, how do you make a living here? Do women work? So then those women sitting over there are saying, no, we don't work, we just stay at home. Then another one adds, and fetch the water, find the firework, and look after the cattle. Then the other one also remembers, and then she also pitches in saying that, okay, and we also prepare the garden and plant the seeds. Then again, another person joins in and says that we do the weeding, then harvest the crops and sell them in the market. And then we buy food at the market, cook meals, and do the household chores, attend the women's group meetings for our communal tasks, like making bricks for the school building, and washing and mending the clothes for the children we bear and raise. That's all. So we don't work. And the facilitator comes to the conclusion that, okay, I just wanted to check. So this is the inefficiency or misrepresentation that is very, very critical for any gender sensitive person to understand, that when we are, because in today's time we have moved ahead from gender sensitivity to understand that we need to be gender responsive, as in there is an acknowledgement that there is a need and we need to address that. So if we want those kind of people to kind of, when we are addressing the data gap, and we are trying to see that researchers or scholars are going into the field to collect information, they have to be highly sensitive and empathetic to understand what exactly needs to be quantified in what manner. So those understandings are very, very critical. Can I have the next image, please? And this is another very, very topical imagery, which shows the oft repeated concept that men is the breadwinner. Of course, he is the breadwinner, no denying that. But what is the part of the women in this entire conversation? So you will see she's laden with so many marginalized issues and so many discriminations that she's unable to stand on her own feet and kind of function. So this is the background on which the entire gender conversation needs to be kind of have the footing on. And that's why when we say that we need to understand the gender responsive budgeting and planning, we always ensure that when we are having this conversation, at least that sensitivity is grown or at least developed in the audience that we are in conversation with. And in the conversation that we have, we generally have it with the government departments and the officials. So having to make them understand that this is the foundation on which the entire gender responsive budgeting conversation has to happen is very, very critical. And that's why it is all very topical. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so in a very GRB initiatives are diverse efforts aimed at making government's planning, budgeting, auditing contribute to gender equality, and it analyzes the differential impact of policies and budget on women and men and at other axes, as well as on various other aspects of discrimination. So we always have to keep in mind that it is not just the men and women, because in most of the gender conversation, this question will always be popped in, that are we not addressing the other gender? We are definitely addressing all genders. When we are saying, when we are using this nomenclature of man, women, we are generally using it just for the convenience of it. But when we are addressing the issue and we are working on those policies, we definitely keep in mind all the genders. So that is that goes without saying. However, I just wanted to add that. So can I have the next slide, please? So what is GRB is, in very brief, is this: why we need GRB? Because gender government budgets is the most critical source for enabling these resources. And budget is not just an annual statement of receipt and expenditure. Budget is a process which enables these prioritization. So that is we can have the next one. So when we look at the goals of GRB, it is not just estimate of analyzing the needs, planning and financing estimations, prioritizing for allocations, resource allocation separately, and ensuring appropriate spending, monitoring and assessment of achievements of desired outcomes. So these couple of like 6 or 7 aspects are very, very integral to reach for the GRB implementation. If we are not able to reach these aspects, or are not able to follow this process, then we will not be able to reach those goals. So that's why these are very, very important, and these are the outcomes that we look at. Can I have the next one? So just a refresher, the rationale is basically the economic efficiency, transparency and accountability, advancement of women's rights and gender equality. So these are the rationales, these are the foundations upon which we talk about the GRB conversation. Next one. So we start from the policy formulation, we go to the policy statement, budget compilation, budgeting, the entire process of identifying the budget elements, and then the distinguishing it between the expenditures on activities and the revenue collection, and then summed up by the outcome. So the entire process has many aspects to it. Broadly, it is we can see that it is the policy appraisal and auditing, and also the budgeting appraisal. So these are primarily the windows on which we work. So, so when we are talking about the tools, we have to keep in mind that there are a range of tools that are with us to work on the gender GRB analysis. However, we have to we always have to customize according to the requirement of the client. So, say for instance, if we are working with X subnational, they might be having some gender aspects that need to be addressed, which Y might not be having. So then how do you customize that? How do you understand those nitty able to understand on which boxes can we be putting the GRB conversation in the subnational, and GRB the challenges in choosing is, that's why very, very critical, because that is where we the people who work on this area are very important to keep in mind, that there are a few aspects that need to be kept in mind. Can I have the next one, please? So primarily, broadly, there are three approaches that we talk about when we are talking about gender budgeting. One is gender analysis, the other is gender disaggregated data and indicators for budgeting, and the last one is costing for gender equity. So can I have the next slide? So basically, when we are talking about gender analysis, it is a critical first step to identifying existing gender gaps in any ongoing or planned program in the project area. This and develop programs that are responsive to the differential needs of each sexes, be it, whoever be the sexes. That actually gives us the idea about it, and which helps us to reduce the gender inequity in it. So the objective of these steps are to assess the situation of the women and men and to understand their different needs and priorities within the context of the sector. It also helps to understand how we can address the existing inequities between men and women through various programmatic interventions. Going into a place where we are seeing that the livelihood aspect has to be addressed. Willingness of participation. So all these parameters are, and of course there are many other parameters. Broadly, these are the parameters that we need to keep in mind while we are designing, analyzing a making a gender analysis of the GRB plan. So these are basically which gives us an idea, and this is actually done through this this that we use. Can I have the next one? Yeah, so after that, or simultaneous to that, if we look into the gender analysis and the budgeting element of it when we are talking with the government, then we can also understand that because the earlier one was open to all, the community, to every other stakeholder. This one is actually particularly to the government when we are having the conversation with the government. So when the analysis process starts, we have to understand that the first thing that we need, the data that we need, is the sex disaggregated information, which is lacking in today's time. And some departments have it, some sectors have it, but not all of it. And the data is definitely a big challenge, and that's why whenever we are designing, we have to have a very open mind to kind of keep leeway for as many as can be addressed, kind of a thing. Like as you can see, the entire process, that the annual work plan and the budget is a parameter for the government officials to understand what kind of a conversation are we going to have. So that is one of the key areas where we as gender responsive experts get into the conversation, and we try to take them around on that conversation. So for instance, recently, some couple of months back, I wrapped up a couple of departmental work plan and budgeting conversations with departments like education, then we had home, then we had health, and such departments. I'm forgetting the other two, but these were the departments where they already, in the existing plans and programs, they do have gender elements, but the officials many a times are not aware of it. They do not understand how they can be identified on that. So that breaking down and that process of hand-holding the government is very, very critical. And for that also, we ourselves have to have that understanding that where do we intervene. So then after the annual plan is discussed, then they come out with the gender budget statement, and where the budget allocation is specified. And that actually leads to the service delivery discussion, and assessment of the results is, of course, a later period task that needs to be done. However, this entire thing is a policy level discussion, but due to the lack of sex disaggregated data in most of the conversations, this kind of a gap is identified, because whenever we are sitting with any department per se, other than education, because education has extensive levels. So that is one department which is able to participate in this if willing, because they department. But other than that, health also has, but in many elements, when we have to break it down, they do not have that kind of while we are preparing for the GRB. Can I have the next one slide? Yeah. So this is basically is required for having a very processed and structured planning. Yeah. So the last approach that we generally are talking about is the financial cost of undertaking an intervention or delivering services and goods. So it's a little bit guide, we try to assess the transformative strategies and planning into the operational and monitoring action plans and budgeting. We also propose the resources and funding required to meet those project targets. So these are basically the officials identifying the already existing pool of human resources, material or infrastructural costs, and then we also try to guide the project or the program staff on the implementation of it, because once we have designed it, it needs to be implemented. And then we also have to understand the estimating, like we have to also identify that estimating a financial cost for undertaking an investment is very important component, which actually is the basis for the evidence-based planning and budgeting per se. So costing approach provides a valuable information on the financial resources required to achieve budget outcomes and benefits of for all beneficiaries. So and this cuts across all genders. Again, I'm emphasizing, because we need to always keep in mind that when we are talking about gender equality and all those discussions, we are all centered around the equity approach, because we know that there is a section of people who are marginalized and they need to be lifted up. So once that is done, then of course the other gender will also be part of it. Of course, they are not alienated from the conversation, but the resource pool has to be allocated to the person who needs it. So the gap has to be first of all covered. So that's why when we talk about the equity approach, we have to understand that GRB conversation is completely stationed around the equity approach. So can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. So primarily India, when we look at the processes, India has these two parts. They have divided the budget into two parts, where they detail out the schemes and policies and programs which have 100% allocation for women, and the other one reflects the allocation of the allocation for women, constituting at least above 30% of the provision. So currently around 57, 57 ministries have adopted GBC, which is Gender Budget Cell, and over 30 ministries, even including the union territories, are reporting on the gender budget statement annually. So states were also mandated by the central ministry to adopt it, and they are doing it gradually. So this is the update from if I have to point out the states that are doing good work and are trying to make a positive change, then of course Kerala will definitely come into the conversation. Then we have Karnataka, then we have Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Assam, Tripura, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, I have said yes. Then we have Jharkhand. Manipur has also very recently joined in and is doing a fantastic work. So the share of the gender budget overall, if we look into the total budgetary expenditure of the current year, it is actually 4.72%. So although it might sound very less, but it is actually quite a good amount, because earlier it was zero. So when we look into the percentile of it, 4 is way better than 0. So whatever the work that is happening across the country is commendable, and we always encourage that. So can I have the next slide? Just the second last one. So it's basically about what is the structure. If students want to understand what is the structure on which we work on the gender budgeting, so the last slide is basically talking about the schemes, like how do we bifurcate it. So we bring in the schemes or the programs or the institution, then we look into the gender estimates that are culled out, and then the RE is made and the budget estimate is designed. This is for the 100% allocation. The other one is less than 100%, which is, in other words, we actually try to keep it as open as possible, because we want to cover as much as possible. So with that, I would like to conclude my presentation, just adding a couple of words that gender equality and violence against women is a pre-existing phenomenon that gets ever more exacerbated during any form of disaster, current pandemic included. So women continue to be disadvantaged relative to men, and this is an observation like across the globe. So it is a global phenomena, and bringing focus on gender inequities in fiscal policy making can help can lead to a faster progress in eliminating these gaps. So public spending can target key areas such as health, education, livelihood, and all these fundamental areas, and that can actually make lead way to the closing of those gaps. So the revenue measures and changes to laws and regulations can also, of course, support the progress. Government budgets are also always, we have to keep in mind, is it is not gender neutral, because fiscal measures may have different effects on men and women. So understanding that is very, very critical, and the work around gender transformative planning and budgeting strategies with the national government and various subnational governments need to focus urgently on disaster risk management, if not done already, because we know for a fact that there are states who have that preparedness, but there are also states who have not worked on it, and they are having a tough time during this pandemic period, which is a live example of how an eye opener basically to how we have to understand that the entire ecosystem of the institutional mechanism needs to be ready for to address an ex ante and not other ones. So that is my submission. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for such a thought-provoking session and enlightening us with your valuable knowledge. Now we will move forward to question answer. Ma'am, there are two interesting questions by the Sabha. First is, what are the challenges of GRB? If you can elaborate with few examples, particularly in India context. She has also mentioned faced while designing an implementation stage or any program or policies.
Can you repeat the question once more?
Okay. What are the challenges of GRB? If you can elaborate with few examples, particularly in India context.
Okay. So first of all, the understanding around GRB is limited. First thing, that is a huge impediment. And the second very fundamental aspect is the readiness to accept that GRB is needed by different state bodies or government departments is also a challenge that we across the states face, because many a times people have this notion कि अरे जेंडर की बात कर रहे हैं ना, ये तो पता ही है, इस पे क्या करना है, इसको इसको इतना क्या सोचना है, अरे लड़कियों के लिए अलग से पैसा डाल देंगे हो जाएगा. So that is an attitude that people have. So to break that and to bring in the seriousness of the issue is very, very critical. And I've been working in this space for some couple of years now. I feel that that is one of the hugest challenge that we need to address. We address on a daily basis. And but of course there are when I'm talking about challenges, I'll also try to add that the whenever we are talking about a policy, it is based on some factors that I mentioned earlier also, that the data, until and unless the data point is there, how can you design with a zero data? Say for instance, if I take the example of tsunami rehabilitation, that was Dr. Balakrishnan has very elaborately discussed about, or for that matter, any other disaster, natural disaster that they have worked on. If there is an understanding by that particular department, basically it is the Disaster Management Authorities Department, and I think it will be under social justice, which these departments have to understand how a gender lens has to be put into the conversation for addressing the not only here we have to also understand that not only is the recovery being discussed, it is also the mitigation that is discussed. So it is a multi-layered, multi-tiered conversation that we have to have when we are designing this kind of a plan for any particular any department. So until and unless we have hard fact, hard data, planning a policy around non-data becomes very problematic. As she also pointed out, that even if somebody does not require those nets or something, they are still keeping it. Basically, they are hoarding it. But why are they doing it? Because they, whatever their mentality, whatever their thought processes, if we when we are designing the policy, we don't know those realities, then if from one region there is a data set that is saying that 5,000 people needed this, but the census is saying there are only 100 people in that village. Do you see the dichotomy or the disparity of the data? So those elements are very, very critical when we are addressing any kind of a policy change in GRB conversation. So those are the challenges. Other than that, the sensitivity around the conversation is very, very critical. And I won't say all, but most of the time we see that planners and administrators are unaware of GRB per se as a tool. So then updating them on that, and then starting working on them, and the readiness and the willingness to work around it are those like those are the challenges that we face on a regular basis. So, but then if you find very good administrators, they easily support it, and then the changes happen. So, in my current experience and even in my ex experience, I have seen a very proactive administrators who have made like strides of changes, and it has made the entire gender the GEWE landscape in a different light. So GRB can be a huge, fantastic tool to even address EVA issues, ending violence against women issues, and empowerment issues. So it is a very strategic tool. It's just that how much is your understanding and knowledge around it to kind of influence the subnationals or the parties you're talking to adopt it, to implement it, and to kind of take it forward. Because as you can understand, GRB is something which as policymakers we can train them, but we cannot continue the conversation. There has to be a institutional mechanism where it is stationed, and which is kind of streamlined, mainstreamed in the entire conversation. So that is something. Those are also some of the areas where we find the challenges. So yeah, I think I've addressed Sabha's query. If she has a
She has one more question. She
Okay.
has asked, where do we India stands in GRB as compared to world, and what should be what should be the roadmap for us, a nation, in furthering it effectively?
Actually, I've already addressed it in the presentation that when we look into the entire GRB landscape, India is doing pretty well in comparison. However, this is not to say that India is the best. I will definitely not say that, because I have high hopes from the state, from the country. So they have to buckle up, because there are many states who are not able to do it as well as they could, kind of a thing. So there are many instances where missed opportunities are being seen. So that those are the areas that India needs to work on. But when we talk about the overall GRB conversation, India is definitely doing a good work. But of course there is a lot needs to be done yet. But I will say that average medium level good performing country overall can be cited as India. Yeah. Does it
And
answer?
there are several chats saying that great session and excellent presentation, and
Thank
some
you.
of them have asked your PPT. Can we share with them with your permission?
Actually,
You say no, we will not. It's
yeah,
your description.
it's better that you don't share it, because
Okay.
I have only given pointers. It will not help them. I can give them the books
Okay.
which will help them. So the pointers will not help them. I will give them the source books. I will mail it to Vaishali, and you can share it with your participants, because this is a very detailed discussion, and until and unless you read about it thoroughly, it will not be very useful. And as students, you are the next upcoming generation who has to take this mantle, because of course we are also in a stage where we are opting out, or in the transition. So you guys need to buckle up, because this is an area that has a lot of work to do, and a lot of area to kind of not only improve but actually make the actual change that we social workers have been going on talking for god knows how many years now. I passed out like 15-20 years back. So since then we have been talking about it. Now when we see that the forum, the gender conversation that is happening, I feel a bit encouraged, because a lot of improvement has happened. So I would only request the students to understand these tools more effectively. And also, please do keep in mind, it's not that the things that I have talked about is the total of it. It is just the highlights that I've shared. There is, as I have also indicated, there are many strategies, many approaches. India is adopting approach which other countries are not approaching, or there are few countries who are also adopting the same thing. So the strategies that are effective to a particular state is also very, very critical to understand. So that's why I would request students to study further on it and work on it in this space. It would be wonderful. I understand there is a TISS student who is doing his PhD around it. So I'm hopeful that it will be a good research, because he was there in one of my presentations, and then later he connected with me, because the issue is even the literature around these conversations is very isolatory and very kind of, it's not in open access. So if anybody is interested and wants further information and further literature around it, please feel free to connect and let me know, and I will definitely share that. Yeah. Is there any other topical question?
One more question can you take, ma'am?
Yes, sure. Please tell me.
There is a question from the Neeta Dhute. She has asked, shouldn't government look at this paucity of data and give employment to job seekers to remove unemployment? It should give successor to several, wouldn't it?
No, it wouldn't. Because first of all, we always have to understand, when we are talking in the GRV space, we are not talking about blaming somebody. Nobody is to be blamed. We ourselves, like, for a fact, I know, for my case, I know, because my family is spread across the country and abroad. When the census was done, half the information was not shared. In my own case, there are many people who do not even take the kind of trouble to actually share that information with the government, because census information is one of the most critical source, open access source data, which can be ratified. And that is one of, because when you talk about NFHS data, or any other source of data, those are all samples. Samples don't help in policy making. They can only indicate, but they cannot help. We need to have a census data, and that census, when India does, when the country does it, how many of us are actually participating in it? So when we are saying that yes, government needs to give the query was to, does the employment needs to be generated, something like that, right? So yes, generation of employment is critical, but are we skilled enough? Are we understanding what are our areas of work that interest us? Because one thing that we always have to keep in mind, these generic skill development programs do not help in the long run, because the candidate might lose out interest. उसको प्रेशर में वो कोर्स करा दिया गया, और जब उसको नौकरी लगी, वो थोड़े दिन करने के बाद वो फिर ऑप्ट आउट करेगा. सॉरी, आई एम यूजिंग हिंदी. I suppose there must be non-Hindi speakers. I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that there are many cases where we see that the skill development avenues that are provided, the standard ones, they do not actually cater to the real needs of that particular person. So we have to also understand what our interest areas are, and accordingly try to participate in that. So if you are talking about policy changes, the every policy is notified in a newspaper. How many of us actually take the effort to the emails that are given in the below the notification? How many of us take the effort to actually give our comments on it? Like, as an organization we do, of course, but in our own personal capacity, do we do that? How many of us do that? So those are the areas to the student that has raised this query, that please understand we have a lot of responsibility that we need to first of all bear. And of course government has to be accountable, and they can be taken to task through the right channel. So just by blaming will not help, be it the state government or the union government. Blaming will not help us, because we will not be able to get the resource that we need. So to get the resource, we have to identify what are the channels, what are the mechanisms through which we have to work. And then when that does not help, then what needs to be done? So then, for a fact that once you have tried to explore those avenues and you have not received any information, there is a vital tool that we have called RTI. Through that you can gather that information, and that is the ratified information. Why are you not using those tools in the right way, not in the wrong way, in the right way? So please understand, in this entire policy making program and schemes discussion that we have, we always try to see every stakeholder's uh, position. And that's why in this presentation, I was time and again asking Vaishali, who are the respondents, who are the participants? Because if there are government officials, their understanding of GRB has to be different. The sessions that I take with the with the government officials is completely different, because there we have to explain to them what they have to do. Here I was talking about what exactly, what overall GRB is, and what are the different roles, what are the different, it was a conceptual discussion that we had, but with different stakeholders, we have different conversation. As students, it would be very good for you all to read up on it and then write on it. If you have the skill to write, do do that, and do engage with your faculties on that kind of a conversation. Because one thing, many a times I have seen, RNR per se, resettlement rehabilitation per se, is often misunderstood. So that is also that also needs to be understood, because when a department is engaging in a social impact assessment, their purview is very different. But IMF, any financial institute will be seeing it in a very different light. So how, first of all, we have to always understand who needs that benefit, because the AP, the affected party, is the person who needs that help. हम तो वहां पे जाके सिर्फ इंफॉर्मेशन गैदर करेंगे, लेकिन उसका इम्पैक्ट पड़ेगा उस एपी पे, उस अफेक्टेड पार्टी पे. So we have to be very honest in the information that we gather. So that I mean, I can go on talking about these things because these are my areas. But yeah, thank you. I hope I have been able to answer the query. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Now I will request, I hope all participants are satisfied with all the answers. And now I'll request Dr. Pallavi Sharma, young professional at Center for Psychosocial Trauma Care, National Institute of Disaster Management, to propose formal vote of thanks. Over to you, Pallavi, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. And am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Namaste and good evening to all. And it is my privilege to give a vote of thanks for the second day of this three-day online training program on gender, disaster, and sustainable communities. So on behalf of National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, and Women Development and Empowerment Cell, KES Shroff College of Arts and Commerce, Mumbai, I thank the patron of this training program, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, BSM, the Executive Director, NIDM, New Delhi, and Dr. Lily Bhushan, Principal, KES Shroff College of Arts and Commerce, Mumbai, for their kind support and proper guidance to conduct this program. It is my heartily thanks to the coordinators of the training program, that is Dr. Ajinder Walia ma'am, Assistant Professor NIDM, Dr. Banitha Ismani, Chairperson WDEC, Ms. Samitha Singh Gupta, Convener WDEC, Ms. Bishali Ojha, Member WDEC, and Aarti Gadre, Member WDEC, Jayashri Lokhande, Member WDEC, and Mr. Rajkumar Gupta, Member WDEC. My sincere thanks to our today's eminent speakers, that is Dr. Geeta Balakrishnan, who has made us aware of importance of gender mainstreaming in disaster risk reduction initiatives, and Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, who enlightened us with the importance of, who enlightened us that how important is the gender planning, policy making, and budgeting and auditing in disaster management. So, and in the end, I would like to thank the participants who are from multidisciplinary background, including disaster management faculty, teachers, principals, school administrator, community-based organizations, and other stakeholders working in this area, and has spared their precious time and joined us in this training program. Oh, and obviously, I also extend my thanks to IT department for providing technical support for this program. Thank you so much. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Pallavi ma'am. Thank you, Geeta ma'am. Thank you, Sanghamitra ma'am, for your valuable knowledge you have shared with us, and such an amazing session we had today. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of you, and thank you to Dr. Bhushan also.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It was really interesting. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yes, ma'am.